They never thought you would. That's the thing about people with avoidant wiring. They build a world where closeness is optional, intimacy is a threat, and your love is something to be rationed, not received. They never expected to lose you, because they counted on your need. They counted on your hope. They counted on your hunger for connection to keep you orbiting their absence. You were the consistent one, the present one, the grounded, feeling, listening, seeing, showing up one. So they came and went, waxed and waned, opened and shut like a gate made of glass, shimmering just enough to make you think this time would be different. But it wasn't. And one day, you stopped chasing the shimmer. One day, you realized the gate wasn't leading anywhere. One day, you walked. And that's when everything changed, not just in your life, but in theirs. Because once you walk away from someone avoidant, that's when their real attachment system kicks in. Not while you were showing up, not while you were giving your best, not while you were carrying the weight of both of you. No, they only feel it once you're gone. They don't recognize love when it's right in front of them. They recognize it through absence. They recognize it through loss. They recognize it when the light goes out, and you were the light. You were the one who stayed up late, piecing together the confusion. You were the one who kept offering presents, even when it wasn't returned. You were the one who extended grace when they gave you silence. You were the one who asked the questions they pretended not to hear. And now they're walking through a house with the lights off, wondering why nothing feels warm anymore. Because you were the warmth. And when you left, the temperature dropped. But will they say that? Rarely. What they'll do instead is perform regulation. They'll post more. They'll pray more. They'll talk about boundaries like scripture. They'll act like your departure was the answer to a question they hadn't yet asked. They'll make it seem like you were just a phase, a lesson, a visitor on the way to their real healing. Because admitting what your absence actually means would collapse the self-image they worked so hard to protect. See, avoidant people have to believe they're the safest one in the room, the most evolved, the most in control. Because if they allow the truth in, that they pushed away someone who really saw them, they'd have to confront their fear. And most of them aren't ready. So instead of grieving you honestly, they edit the story. They cut you down to size. They shrink what you gave. They reframe your love as pressure, your clarity as control, your insight as intrusion, because that makes them feel strong again. It's not personal, it's structural. Avoidant attachment isn't just fear of closeness, it's fear of needing, fear of being seen, fear of giving over control to someone who might hurt them. And so, when they find someone who actually offers love, real love, it feels like a trap. They don't know how to relax into it, so they analyze it, spiritualize it, dismantle it in their head before it ever touches their heart. And when you finally say, I won't do this anymore, I won't be punished for caring, I won't be gaslit into doubting my instincts, I won't water myself down to avoid scaring you. They freeze because they don't know how to respond to someone who knows their worth and is willing to leave. But they'll pretend. They'll pretend they chose this. They'll pretend they're doing better. They'll pretend they're above it until the mirror shows up, until your name gets mentioned again, until someone says, didn't you two used to be close? Until they hear a song, a sentence, a prayer that brings your voice back into their head. And then they remember. Not all at once, but slowly. With ache, with confusion, with that quiet, devastating question. What if I was wrong about them? Because they were. They weren't just wrong about you, they were wrong about themselves. They thought they were immune to loss. They thought they could outrun intimacy. They thought they could flirt with connection and never have to pay the cost. But they lost something irreplaceable. They lost you. And here's the hard part. Most of them will never say it out loud. They'll fold it into poetry, into devotionals, into status updates. They'll find a way to say everything without saying your name, and you'll feel it. You'll hear the echo of your impact in their metaphors. You'll see your shape behind their healing arc. You'll recognize your fingerprints in the growth they claim is theirs alone. But don't go back. Don't take the bait, because here's what avoidant people do after you walk away. They get louder about their independence. They dive deeper into spiritual abstraction. They elevate detachment into a form of wisdom, and they convince others, maybe even themselves, that they are finally healed. But if that healing can't hold your memory, it's not healing. If that wisdom can't admit your worth, it's not wisdom. If that clarity requires your erasure, it's not clarity. It's image control. And you don't need to control your image, because you're not pretending. You're not performing stability. You're actually rebuilding it. You're not posturing as grounded. You're actually rooted now. You're not spiritualizing avoidance. You're actually choosing presence, even if it's only with yourself. And the path ahead, it's so much clearer now, because walking away wasn't just an ending. It was a vow that you won't confuse silence for peace again, that you won't chase someone who only feels safe when you're at arm's length, that you won't water yourself down just to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You are not too much. You were just with someone who wasn't ready for your depth. And instead of admitting that, they made your depth the danger. But you know now, you know what it feels like to be starved for connection and gaslit for noticing. You know what it feels like to keep showing up for someone who only met you halfway, if that. You know what it's like to be seen when it's convenient and avoided when it's intimate. And now you know better. So you're doing better. And they feel that, even if they don't admit it, even if they wrap it in parables, even if they send love from afar, even if they act like your exit was some mutual evolution. They feel the absence of your gaze, the quiet where your affirmation used to live, the stillness where your spirit used to hold them. And maybe, just maybe, they'll look in the mirror one day and say, I couldn't hold what I asked for. But that's not your closure to wait on. Your closure happened the moment you stopped abandoning yourself to be understood. Your closure was when you looked at the version of yourself who kept trying to win love from a locked door and said, come home, I've got you now. You were never the problem. You were the presence. You were never the threat. You were the truth. You were never the pressure. You were the invitation. And now you are the proof that healing isn't about who you can hold on to. It's about who you're willing to release when your soul's integrity is on the line. You release someone you loved. That doesn't make you cold. That makes you whole. And they'll keep doing what avoidants do, missing you in private, framing you in public, rewriting the narrative so they don't have to feel the ache. But you don't need the last word, because your life is the last word. The joy you're building, the peace that doesn't ask you to shrink, the love that doesn't require exile, that's your closure, that's your exhale, that's your proof. You walked away and you didn't disappear. You walked away and you didn't collapse. You walked away and you got louder in your spirit, brighter in your clarity, wider in your capacity for love that loves you back. So keep walking. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them call it whatever they need to feel safe. Because you're not in that story anymore. You're free. And freedom like this is earned. It doesn't come from time passing. It doesn't come from scrolling self-help posts or repeating affirmations that don't quite land. It comes from staring at the ruins of what you thought was love and choosing to plant something anyway. It comes from holding your own confusion long enough for it to turn into clarity. It comes from realizing that someone who refused to love you deeply still taught you how deeply you're capable of loving. You learned that love is not always loud, that sometimes it disappears behind crossed arms, cryptic texts, and sudden silences. That some people will call you intense when they really mean accurate. That some people will shame your intuition when it gets too close to the truth. But you also learned that your sensitivity is sacred, that your instincts were never the problem, that your emotional generosity isn't weakness, it's wealth, That your longing for depth was not naive, it was prophetic. You saw what could be, even when they couldn't. You were ahead of them emotionally, spiritually, relationally, and you paid for it. Because when you meet someone avoidant, and you operate from your heart while they operate from defense, you will always feel like too much. Not because you are, but because they're too armored to receive what's real. So you started shrinking, biting your tongue, delaying your needs, explaining basic truths in 10 different tones just to find one they wouldn't call too emotional. You made yourself smaller, softer, simpler, not because you lacked strength, but because you thought love required sacrifice. And it does. But not that kind. Not the sacrifice of self, not the sacrifice of truth, not the sacrifice of your voice so someone else doesn't feel exposed. The moment you walked away, you stopped that cycle. You stepped out of the fog and into the light. And that's when the real healing began. Not for them, for you. You stopped trying to get closure from someone who couldn't give it. You stopped trying to be chosen by someone who didn't even choose themselves. You stopped praying for a future with someone who couldn't be present. And you started coming home, back to the part of you that always knew. The part that winced every time they praised you publicly but punished you privately. The part that noticed how the rules always changed depending on their mood. The part that knew they were never fully honest but hoped you were wrong. That part is loud now. That part is leading, and it's taking you somewhere they can't follow. Because your healing doesn't revolve around their epiphany. Your healing doesn't depend on their apology. Your healing doesn't wait for someone else's readiness. You're building forward now, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, truth by truth. You're choosing friends who don't get weird when you ask for clarity. You're finding community that doesn't require you to apologize for your depth. You're experiencing peace, not the peace that comes from walking on eggshells, but the peace that comes from finally standing tall. You're not looking back for signs anymore. You're not decoding mixed signals. You're not strategizing how to re-enter their good graces. You're blessing what happened because it taught you who you are. And you're releasing it because you finally believe you're worthy of something mutual. You stopped negotiating with someone who withheld affection like a test. You stopped waiting for someone to get brave enough to meet you. You stopped romanticizing inconsistency. You stopped calling it love when it was mostly self-preservation wrapped in charm. And they know. Even if they don't say it, even if they still perform enlightenment, even if they still act like they were the one who let go, they know. They know what they lost. They know you were rare. They know your gaze was shelter, your words were water, your presence was proof that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to live their whole life behind armor. But they chose the armor. They chose the image. They chose the echo chamber where no one challenges their avoidance. And you chose you. You chose the life beyond longing. You chose to stop playing the role they cast you in. You chose your dignity over their approval. That's what they feel now. Not just your absence, but your upgrade. They can feel that you've leveled up, that you're not waiting by the phone, that you're not scanning their feed for signs of regret, that you're not holding your breath, hoping they'll reach out. They can sense that your energy has been rerouted. And it stings. Because now, every new connection they try to form will be touched by the shadow of your standard. Every person who tries to understand them will stumble into the void you used to fill. And no matter how they perform their growth, they'll have to reckon with this. They had access to someone who loved them deeply, saw them fully, and was willing to walk through the mess with them. And they pushed that person away. So let them. Let them post their poems and parables. Let them call you an old chapter. Let them build new myths about their expansion. You don't need to edit the truth to be palatable. You don't need to make them a villain. They were scared, and scared people run. Scared people sabotage. Scared people pretend the fire you lit was just a flicker. But you know, You remember how much of yourself you brought into that space. You remember the tenderness you extended. You remember the inner contortions you made just to keep the connection alive. And you remember how much it hurt when they wouldn't meet you halfway. So don't forget that now. Don't gaslight your own memory just because they're spinning the story. Hold the ache, hold the beauty, hold the complexity, but don't go back. Because returning won't bring resolution. It'll just reawaken the old ache. And you've come too far for that. You've rebuilt too much. You've grown in ways they'll never get to witness. Not because you're punishing them, but because they didn't choose to grow with you. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk beside you. Not everyone is meant to hold your heart. Not everyone can hold that mirror without flinching, but someone can, someone will. And when they do, you'll know the difference. It won't feel like tension. It won't feel like walking on glass. It won't feel like decoding silence or over-explaining your needs. It will feel like breath, like exhale, like being met. Because you walked away, you made space for something that can actually hold you. You said no to the ghost of love so you could say yes to the real thing. And that's the healing. That's the revolution. That's the chapter you're writing now, not for them to read, but for you to live. So breathe into that. Let this be your anthem. You were never too much. You were never the problem. You were never the danger. You were the clarity they couldn't handle, the warmth they didn't know how to receive, the mirror they weren't ready to face. And now you are the freedom they couldn't give you. You are the peace they couldn't sustain. You are the answer to your own prayer. And you're not waiting for anyone to catch up. You're walking, you're building, you're blooming, you're becoming. And you're doing it without apology, without shame, without the need to be rewritten in someone else's story. Because you've got your own now. And this one holds your name, right? So when the day comes, when you think of them and it no longer stings, when their name floats through conversation and you don't flinch, when someone asks what happened and you don't need to explain, that's not indifference, that's integration. That's how you know the lesson has landed. Because healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like silence. Sometimes it feels like distance that doesn't ache. Sometimes it's the simple peace of not needing to prove your pain anymore. You are not haunted. You are not holding your breath. You are not wondering what else you could have done. You did what most people are too scared to do. You told the truth. You held the mirror. You loved with your whole chest, even when it wasn't safe to do so. And when it was time to go, you left with your soul intact. That's rare. That's holy. That's strength. And now you walk into rooms differently. Not to prove your worth, not to chase connection, but because you are the connection, because you are the proof. Every step forward is sacred. Every new boundary is a spell. Every time you choose yourself, you remind the world what love is supposed to look like. So keep choosing, keep walking, keep shining in a way that says, I survived that, I integrated that, I became more honest because of that. You are not waiting for the past to resolve. You are already what it gave you. And that's the closure, that's the gift, that's the power.